In Windsor, vacancy rates were very low. We were looking at kind of like a 2, 3, 4% vacancy rate across southwestern Ontario, and that includes Windsor. So, again, what we can learn about that is an understanding of where exactly we are in the rental market. So, are we in a landlord's market? Are we in a balanced market? Or are we in a renter's market? What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and in today's video, we're going to be discussing the Windsor, Ontario real estate market. So I'm constantly getting asked questions about local real estate markets here in Canada, and we figured why not start a new series where we're going to cover the different markets and my perspective as a real estate investor in regards to those real estate markets. Now, if you've got a real estate market that you'd like to see me discuss, jump in that comment section down below, share the city name, and I'll make sure that we hit it in future videos. But today, we're going to be talking about Windsor, Ontario. And unless you're local to Windsor, Ontario, there's a good chance you haven't given it a lot of attention, and it's kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of real estate markets here in Canada. It gets no respect. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of potential when it comes to the Windsor, Ontario real estate market. And so what I love about Windsor in particular is the affordability. So one thing that we first need to look at when you're looking to break into any real estate market is it affordable? Can the average person living there afford the rent or afford to buy a property? And so what I love to start with is, where's minimum wage? And so when we're looking at markets like Windsor, Ontario, let's take a step back and understand that minimum wage in Canada isn't usually city-based, it's actually province-wide. So here in Ontario, you're likely looking at $14 an hour right now and soon to be $15 an hour if I understand our minimum wage law is correct. So based upon that, we can then reverse engineer the affordability of, say, your base renter. So if we assume that someone's working full-time in a given year, that's usually assumed to be about 2,000 hours a year. And if you're making $15 an hour, well, 2,000 hours, that's going to be roughly $30,000. The next thing that we can look at is Stats Canada and see what the average Canadian spends on shelter. And again, quick spoiler alert, the average Canadian spends about 30-40% of their income on shelter. So again, we can reverse engineer that into our $30,000 wage earner. They can afford about $10,000 a year on shelter. Again, if we break that down into a monthly basis, it's going to be a little over $800 a month. And so this is something that I'm really going to use to help me understand the local real estate market in Windsor. $800 a month. Well, if I'm looking to, say, rent out a 2-bedroom apartment, I would argue that affordability would dictate that anywhere from $800 to $1,600 a month is going to be in that affordable range. And now, obviously, this doesn't happen in a vacuum, and you're going to have to look at rent aggregator websites like RentFaster or potentially PadMapper. Or alternatively, you can jump onto websites like Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace and see what the average rents look like in your market. As well, you can jump onto CMHC Canada, and they do a rental market survey every October. And so right now you could jump in and see where the market rents were for, say, October 2019, and hopefully soon they'll be releasing the data for October 2020. So again, this will help us understand roughly where the rental market is at compared to the affordability of the average renter. And I always love starting with that baseline of what's minimum wage and what can that person afford. And if the type of rental units that I'm looking at getting into can be afforded by that individual, well, I feel like there's a very robust floor in regards to rent prices. And that's exactly the case in Windsor, Ontario. Because, again, with a 2-bedroom apartment, I'd argue that affordability is $800 to $1,600 a month. Because if you've got one wage earner, they can afford about $800. But if you've got 2 wage earners, say a young couple or 2 roommates, now all of a sudden their affordability is $1,600 a month. So that's one of the first things I'm going to look at in regards to any real estate market. The second is vacancy rate. So again, we can go to websites like CMHC and find out what the vacancy rates are in any given year in a Canadian market. In addition, you can look at local websites or local newspapers to also find more up-to-date data based upon local surveys. And pre-COVID, because we don't have a lot of data during COVID, in Windsor, vacancy rates were very low. We were looking at kind of like a 2, 3, 4% vacancy rate across southwestern Ontario, and that includes Windsor. So again, what we can learn about that is an understanding of where exactly we are in the rental market. So are we in a landlord's market? Are we in a balanced market? Or are we in a renter's market? while a landlord's market is usually going to be considered a vacancy rate of 5% or less. A balanced market is going to be a 5 to 10% vacancy rate, and anything above a 10% vacancy rate is usually going to be considered a renter's market. So again, that's another strong indicator for landlords in Windsor, the fact that vacancy rates were in that range that we would consider a landlord's market, where we can consistently increase rents because the demand is greater than the supply when it comes to those rental units. So then moving beyond that, another aspect I love looking at is population growth. So again, we can look at Stats Canada and also the Ministry of Finance here in Ontario, and both of them will have great resources to show you the long-term population growth. But if you didn't realize it, Windsor is actually becoming a hub for immigrants coming to Canada. And Canada's already projecting even greater immigration in the future years, irregardless of COVID as well. So again, that's not expected to actually impact the long-term immigration into provinces like Ontario, or specifically cities like Windsor, Ontario. Then the next thing I like to look at is the employment situation. So again, when we look at Windsor, it's got this bias and assumption that it's all automotive industry. Now, manufacturing does make up a large base of the employment sector in Windsor, but we also need to understand that you've got the busiest border crossing in North America. It's also on the busiest highway in North America, the 401 corridor. Beyond that, we've got it as a regional hub. So because it's the biggest city in the area, it's going to have the local hospitals, it's going to have the university and the college, and really it's going to have any sort of regional government buildings there as well. So again, that creates a strong basis when we're looking at the employment picture. Then finally, what I like to look at is more novel industries that might be coming up. When I see Quicken Loans opening up a satellite office in Windsor, Ontario, again, that's a really strong indicator that maybe there's going to be some more tech-oriented jobs or finance-oriented jobs going in. And in fact, over the last year, we've already seen them increase the number of people working in that office compared to what was originally projected or expected when they made the initial announcement. One last thing that I'm just going to put as kind of an aside here that's really unique about Windsor. If you didn't know, the University of Windsor, Ontario, it actually has the only full-time recruiting campus in India, which is a really interesting aspect, which again should create a certain floor of demand for international students coming to Canada. And international students obviously need somewhere to live because they're not local to the region. So again, that's going to create a certain level of demand when we're looking at, say, niche markets like student rentals. So really, when I'm looking at Windsor, Ontario, what I see for a potential investor is a great market, whether you're looking at wholesaling, wholetailing, flipping, doing buy and hold investments, BRRRR investments, or even potentially Airbnb, rent-to-owns, or just maybe an exit to a vendor take-back sort of business model. There's a lot of options because that affordability is there and because the baselines of the economics look pretty strong. Outside of that, there's a couple large projects currently going on in Windsor. We've got the two major bridge projects, which are expected to create temporary jobs for the next 5 years. Again, if we see uncertainty or instability in the employment market because of things like COVID, there's a good chance that big, large government spending projects like these two bridges will really help balance out the employment picture for a market like Windsor, Ontario. So that's Windsor, Ontario, and a quick little snapshot here in 2020. I'd love to hear your opinion. Are you currently investing in Windsor, Ontario, and what sort of real estate investment strategy are you currently implementing? Let us know in the comment section down below. As well, share your experiences with the Windsor market. What sort of rents are you getting? What sort of 1% rule above or below are you able to achieve? What sort of rent multipliers are you guys looking for as active investors in Windsor, Ontario? Share it with your fellow viewers in the comment section down below. But again, if you guys would like to see me cover other cities, jump in that comment section, name the city, and I'll make sure on a future video we hit it.